Great start. We are going to be talking about our featured topic is market outlook and strategies to land your next role. As those who are returning to Beauty Talent Talk and those who've never come to an episode, welcome. But our mission is to inspire, share expert insights, empower, and support personal and professional growth. And more than ever, I think this is so important. I think more professionals are trying to navigate so many complexities in today's job market and just the beauty industry as it's gone through so many changes. So I'm excited about this conversation today and sharing more about what I've learned through a lot of conversations and what I foresee in navigating 2026. So Kirsty, thanks for being here and being my partner.
Oh, you're very welcome. I'm very excited to be here today. And I love these kind of shows, Debbie, because I get to pick your brain. And not only I get to do that, but everybody watching. So as we go through, we do have some questions that we're going to go through. But if you have anything you want clarification on, if you want Debbie's opinion on anything, if you even want to push back on anything, please do pop your comments in and I will bring them to Debbie as we go through. But Debbie, I want to start by referencing 2025. I think we can all agree it was a year of uncertainty and obstacles. I'll be generous there. And I know a lot of people are hoping that 2026 is different. So what is it that you foresee for 2026?
So I want to set the tone of let's go back to 2025 because I think a lot of the scenarios and variables and challenges that we experience in the beauty industry, it does kind of set the stage of what to expect in 2026. So 2025, we dealt with inflation that was impacting consumer spending, consumers trading down, extending their services, going to their hairstylists a little bit less or longer in between, same with facials. Tariffs had a significant impact. So we all know that. That was causing a lot of chaos with profit margins and profitability across the industry. Retailers struggling. So Saks was having a lot of financial struggles. We know the outcome at this point for which has transpired in January of this year. And then looking at Target, their DEI controversy caused a lot of impact to brands that were selling at Target and consumers boycotting it. And then professional hair care, the distribution model is also being quite impacted and changing rapidly. Let's not forget the drugstores. So drugstores have been losing ground. Some of the theft happening in the drugstores and their way of putting up the, let's say, kind of jailing the products, all of the ways that they're being merchandised is very challenging. And I think just impacting and helping Amazon do better. But drugstores are not doing well. They're losing ground. Direct to consumer, so e-commerce, customer acquisitions have skyrocketed. Looking at like private equity and the banks, we're being very conscientious and very conservative would be a better way to put it with investment in a brand. So much of this went into such a vulnerable and very complex 2025 with a lot of ups and downs. So we now fast forward it to 2026. There's been so much uncertainty that everyone has been working through to make decisions, whether to hire people, et cetera, et cetera. And I guess the silver lining there is that transactions did happen, decisions did happen. And so as we move forward with this year, there is already an understanding and a foundation of the impact and profitability. So decisions are happening and they're happening more fluidly because executives know how to navigate through uncertainty. So that I think is a silver lining. On a positive, so if we look at the big beautiful bill from the Trump administration, now that is forecasted to add an additional $3,750 per household with tax returns. And that is going to also forecast, and this is through a Wells Fargo economic report that I got my hands on for 2026. And this another highlight is that they're projected $90 billion in consumer spending. Now, if you remember, during COVID, there was those stimulus checks that were going out, and they were to help people supplement their income, et cetera. But a lot of consumers were spending money on what made them feel good. So what makes them feel good? Beauty products. What made them feel good at that time? There's actually an uptick in cashmere. So, hopeful that the additional income that households will receive will lead to additional spend, and beauty brands will benefit from that in the industry. And then just looking at beauty products in general, they have an emotional appeal, and I think that the more people continue to buy them, it's going to help the industry. So this is the reality check that 16,000 people lost their jobs in the industry in 2025. And the job volume is not going to return at that same loss. So there is hiring, and I definitely, from the search that I'm working on and just from across the industry and different brands I'm talking to, there's a lot more momentum for January. Definitely a lot of hiring happening across the board. But again, it's not going to be at that volume. So it's still going to be a very competitive job market, and it's still going to be very important that professionals have a strategy on how they're showing up, how they're going to the interview process, presenting themselves, etc. So I think that I am cautiously optimistic, but I will say that January is already starting off in a really positive and good momentum so far.
Okay, so we can acknowledge 2025 was a bit rough, but really from what you're currently seeing already happening in January, and based on the sort of forecast about what should happen for the rest of the year, cautious optimism is the name of the game here. We are being cautiously optimistic, provided we are putting the effort in with our strategy for, either moving roles or getting a new role or hiring, if that's the position we're in.
Yeah,
perfect.
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. I'd be intrigued if anybody who's listening, what are you thinking? Are you hearing similar things to what Debbie said? If you have, please let us know in the comments while we go on to the next question. So, Debbie, you are incredibly well connected, and you every day are having conversations with both hirers and candidates across the industry. So for you, what is standing out from those conversations that you're having?
Yeah, and set the stage there. So starting end of October, November, budgets were getting finalized. A lot of them were pushed back again due to all the uncertainty last year. And, there were some common threads that I pulled across the industry that executives were mentioning. One was Amazon. Amazon was described as the biggest opportunity, but it's also the biggest challenge. So where a lot of brands are doubling down on Amazon and seeing year over year tremendous amount of growth, for the brands that have wide distribution and omni-channel models, the challenge is, how do we grow Amazon without having a negative impact on the other retailers or other sides of the business? So that to me is a problem that certain executives can solve. So ones with deep omni-channel experience that understand, how to customize channel experiences, SKU assortment, and really understand the profitability per channel to optimize every channel and have some wins. I think that that's going to produce a lot of different opportunities as we move forward. And then just Amazon in general, I think there's been a lot of investment, and we're seeing more and more brands that are on Amazon or creating, more SKUs and assortment on Amazon. But I also think that the team around Amazon is going to get bigger, meaning more in-house hires. From an executive I spoke with recently, he was talking about just AI technology. And I think we're also going to see some of the AI technology come into play and possibly take out agency spending and, try to own everything in-house. So it'll be interesting to see how we navigate that in the future. But Amazon's a big opportunity. The professional distribution model. So when we look at the Cosmoprops, etc., that's going through a complete evolution right now. And I think that what the future holds is something that I think the industry is still figuring out. But the amount of folks that have been impacted, I think that is an area where there's going to have to be an evolution, and diversifying your experience, going to Amazon, looking at some of the other retail experience, I think is going to be key. Field retail. So field retail really started changing after COVID. Everything got shut down, right? So field retail was non-existent at that point. It's come back. But how education plays into brands is still really key. But at the volume that we used to see, the working with cast members and being in the field, it's just not there. So I think those are also going to be some of the skill sets that are going to need to evolve. And then less is more. I talked a lot about this last year, and I still think that less is more is still an approach in the industry, meaning that you're going to have executives that are doing tactical roles. I mean, I've talked to CEOs and C-level executives that are doing their own hiring. The question is that a good use of your time? But they're being scrappy because they are trying to hire, and they're trying to also run a company and do it with very limited resources. So I think when hires happen, there is going to be expectations to roll up your sleeves at certain companies. And so being flexible and demonstrating that you can be strategic and tactical, I think is going to still play into hiring and just the environment we're in. And social commerce is still playing a significant role. And some may say, well, TikTok Shop's been around for a while. Not everyone has jumped on that bandwagon, especially last year. I think that, it was the question mark, is TikTok going to get banned? It's not. And so you're seeing a lot more opportunities in TikTok Shop where smaller brands are making, a revenue channel play. Some are making it a brand awareness play. Whatever the strategy is, if you're in digital, you're in commerce, and you're not already on top of learning that side of the business, then it's going to be a challenge in the future. It's certainly one that you need to evolve. And we're still seeing more hiring with the TikTok, understanding social commerce, understanding how that plays in with the e-commerce strategy, where it lives on the org chart that evolves and kind of sits depending on the size of the company. So those would be some standout areas.
Yeah, so what I'm seeing is there's quite a lot of kind of change and development and progression with things. But that, I imagine, does mean that people are looking for new and different skill sets, maybe from even outside the industry. So I imagine from a hiring point of view, if you're looking to move, there's real potential there if you have the right skill set.
Yeah, I think that professionals were if you were happily employed last year and there is so many changes happening, and when you start seeing, your colleagues lose their jobs, and these are tenured people that have been in companies for 20 years, that's going to give you pause. You're going to, take a moment and wonder if this is good time, even those people are knocking on your door. And I think that for individuals that are still cautious, it's all about vetting as well, asking questions that are going to make you feel comfortable. I think in the current climate that we've been in, when it gets to a certain point and you can put an NDA in place, but understanding the financial health of a business, because there have been a lot of scenarios that executives have shared with me. They took a job and then they were surprised in a negative way because the company was cash strapped, and the resources they thought they had, they don't have. And it really changed the role itself. And so I do think that, I always, any executive that works with me, I'm a huge advocate of a two-way conversation. And I think that it's really key in the interview process is to make sure that you're checking your boxes just as much as the hiring managers are checking theirs to make it a mutually beneficial fit.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we have had a couple of questions, so I want to pull them up. Some of them kind of lend themselves to questions that we've already discussed. They're going to come later, so I will bring them up later. But Conrad asked, given the optimistic tone with regards to opportunities in January 2026, are there specific fields in the industry that are trending stronger than others, i.e. marketing, sales, product development?
Yeah, I'll say that I think marketing continues to be an area. There's a lot of investment, community building. I mean, if we look at some of the brands that continue to excel, let's say Elf Beauty, I mean, they have defined what community building is. So having marketers that have that lens, I mean, I still feel that the searches are going to be very targeted this year. And I come from the place that when I take searches on, I have a specific achievement that I'm trying to make on behalf of the client and find the right candidates and professionals. But to go back to the question, digital, e-commerce, omni-channel strategies, I'm doing a lot with e-commerce right now. I think product innovation coming from more of a chemistry ingredient place, less on the marketing. I think that's evolved, that continues to evolve. And that's where a lot of the hiring I've seen come from. Now, product development was not a hot ticket last year in hiring. I think that brands and a lot of folks on the contract manufacturing and packaging side echoed this, that there was just a pullback on new innovation. They were really looking to double down on their hero products. And when they are working on newness, it's something that they're guaranteed to be profitable and as guaranteed as can be. but they've done the right due diligence. So I think that for product development, brands need innovation to have a point of difference and to have, consistent consumer loyalty, etc. But it's going to be done, I think, in a much more thoughtful way, where fast beauty and launches every month and every quarter, I think that is gone by the wayside. And I think for a lot of brands, it proved to not be profitable.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you for your question, Conrad. Now, we've had one from Sonia where she says remote work opportunities are shrinking. She's seeing less of them. What is the true behind the scenes reason for this, especially when it comes to personal care? This is limiting the opportunities for many who can't move to locations where their niche or specialty jobs are.
Yeah, and Sonia, you're correct. We're definitely seeing that. I mean, it's hard to give it an exact ratio, but if I was to give something that's very general, I feel like it's like 60-70% of companies are hybrid or on-site, and then the remainder is more remote. And certainly the larger companies, for the most part, I mean, Olaplex has been an exception to the rule, remote. But I think that the thought process from leaders is they just feel that the connection and the fluidity of information shared and being in meetings is more productive. And, I actually spoke about this at an event last Saturday with an executive career coach, Elise, at one of her events, on the importance of being on site. I think for younger professionals that are 10 years and under in their career, I could just speak from my own experience, but being in office and learning in person from other executives was really key to my success. Yes, you can learn on Zoom, but sitting in rooms where you're hearing conversations that maybe don't pertain to you, but you're hearing about problems being solved, their solutions, they are impactful. So I think at certain times in professionals' career, or at least early on, it creates them a lot of foundational success. And you'll get to a place where you can pick and choose what's going to work for your best interest, whether it's on-site, hybrid, or remote. But there has definitely been a decline. And I think anytime companies are not hitting their numbers, and there is maybe a connection to productivity, maybe not, but that's the conversations that happen, that is going to pull people back in the office to ensure that goals are being met.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Hopefully that answered your question, Sonia. Thank you for your questions. Please keep them coming. And Catherine's actually asked a question which lends me very nicely into what we're going to talk about next, which is, it does seem there are more companies putting out new roles and opportunities. Can you cover how someone can stand out in this competitive market? So Debbie, what is it that professionals can do to prepare themselves so that they're coming into this kind of current job market in the best possible place for themselves to get the roles that they want?
Absolutely. So I think let's talk about applicant tracking system and AI and how it's screening resumes first, because that has been, a important factor to consider when putting your resumes together. So resumes need to be simple, easily read. I think titles need to be straightforward. What I mean by that is you get a lot of titles: head of sales, brand partnerships. I mean, unique titles sometimes to the beauty industry. Head of sales, to me, usually equates to more of a director level position. And having a sales director as a title is going to equate to better results. ATSs are given criteria. They scan looking for keywords, and then they push the resume forward from there. So if you have anything that confuses that system, it will most likely decline you and you'll get a rejection message. So I think it's really important, and I know it's time consuming to have to customize a resume, but making sure that your titles, information, and keywords that align, of course, with your experience are on the front end. So maybe it's in your About You section or your summary section that should be in the front. I do want to make a note. I know AI is used a lot more for resumes, and where I do think it can fine tune and elevate that communication piece or just the writing, it's important that it's still kind of speaking your language, your story. And I say this because recently interviewed someone, and I was looking at the resume, and there was a lot of like phenomenal this and phenomenal that. And it just wasn't, it was an odd use of very big, elaborate words for some of the skills. And so when I started diving more into it, and specifically more of the data and kind of the stats that were there that also didn't make sense to me, the response was like, oh, I had AI write it. I didn't realize that was on there. And that is a big no-no. I mean, outside of errors on the resume, spelling errors, which I do see, got to make sure that it tells your unique, authentic story and the data is accurate. So if you are going to let it do some of the writing for you, make sure that it is not reading AI, that it is something that represents you and your language. And then secondary, I would say on the ATS topic, fancy resume. So while I love Canva, Canva's problematic. Anything that's too creative, you have images, you have fancy bullet points, all of that can confuse the system. And while we want to stand out, I think you can stand out with really good achievements and your unique experience versus too much of that. And then going beyond that, I think for the job search, yes, there's going to be positions online. I mean, I only post about 20% of the roles that we work on. We're on a lot of confidential searches that we cannot post. So I think it's really important to continue to work with your network to understand what roles are being hired for. And when you're working with your network, I really recommend not, can you find me a job? But, talk about the industry, talk about your background. You don't have to ask. You can talk about your journey and be top of mind for professionals and be that professional that as you're actively looking, that you are attending, different webinars, learning about the industry, sharing the information with applicable people. That's going to help you, again, be top of mind. Investing in yourself, I think, is going to be key. For people that have been out of work for the last year because it's been such a difficult job market, you're having to explain that. And I think when you look at the impact of 16,000 people in the industry, it can be explained pretty easy. It's been less jobs, more people, and very competitive market. But then what are you doing to keep a pulse on the market? Because I know I worked on searches and, they want somebody that knows Amazon now and the nuances of what's happening Amazon, or the nuances of what's happening with Sephora, Ulta, Target, etc. And so maybe you're not in the business right now or working with those retailers, but are you talking to your colleagues that are working with them, and they're talking about what they're doing differently and how they're having wins in the retail when some of the retailers are struggling. So having information to arm you from a confidence perspective, and also to be a professional can say, hey, I have been actively looking for the right job and I haven't landed it, but I've also been very involved in a lot of discussions. And so I'm got a pulse on what's happening and start sharing examples. I think that's going to set you up. And then I would say lastly is define your job search. I think that sometimes we get into this, let's apply for everything, but what do you want to do? You're going to be the best interviewer when you are the subject matter expert, you are confident in your capabilities, and you know what you bring to the table. So define that first, put a list together and go after those jobs. So if you can define your impact, your success, that's going to lead to a lot of great results.
Okay, perfect. Now we have had a kind of clarifying question, I guess, from Erin. She said, how does ATS communicate back to the hiring manager? Is it a 10 out of 10 keywords mapped and therefore more words the better? Or is it, 30% of this resume matches the job description and therefore less is better? How are we supposed to tailor it to make the ATSs our friend?
Every ATS does operate differently, Erin. So it's more of a complex question, and I can go and have a separate conversation with you about that. But I will say that, depending on the criteria, there are sometimes standard criteria, there's set criteria, and it's not that it talks to, at least from my experience, it's not necessarily giving me kind of a ratio. It's just putting the resume forward. But there are a lot more sophisticated systems out there. And I think ultimately what's been happening, and it's unfortunate, is that it does overscreen, and the overscreening eliminates qualified people. Now, I have secondary plans with my team. So when we do advertise, I have my team going through every single application so that we can make sure we don't overlook. But not every, when we look at less is more, some of these talent acquisition teams just don't have the time and capacity to do that. So that's where it's unfortunate. And I think that the outreach, so yes, you apply online, and then going above and beyond and sending a LinkedIn connection to a hiring manager and just introducing yourself. I think that can also be another way to make sure that you're seen. So I think there's kind of different alternatives there.
Amazing. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so we're going to move on, but if you have any more questions, please do pop them in and I will bring them up to Debbie. So I know we've talked about sort of certain areas, certain fields in the industry, but outside of that, do you see growth in certain areas, moving forward? Is there one particular area that looks like it's going to do really well this year?
Yeah, in looking at 2025 and then having my forecasting meetings, and especially for executives and hiring managers that were very optimistic or planning and forecasting hiring, I think skincare is going to continue to do well, especially body care. There's certainly some standout companies that have continued to have some massive growth in 2025 and see the growth continuing this year. Fragrance has been a category that's continued to grow. We're also seeing a lot of brands now hiring product developers, specifically with fragrance background, to add to their portfolio. So expand into that category to capitalize this trend and growth. Hair care continues to perform really well and remains, a trending category, and it's highly replenishable. Wellness and longevity. So we talk about the wellness category. I mean, look at Ulta. They've doubled down the amount of square footage they've put in stores and the amount of brands that they're working with. In the longevity category, I mean, if you look at Brian Johnson and Blueprint, I believe they raised about 60 million, and that's substantial for that category. So you're seeing a lot of investment, and I definitely have forecasts in those areas. And makeup, I mean, makeup is a challenged category. It's been challenged for quite some time. But I say that, but then you look at e.l.f., you look at Rogue Beauty, you look at Rare Beauty, you look at Victoria Beckham. I mean, they're having significant success and they're still growing. So I think as some categories may not be excelling, I still think that opportunities arise and hiring still happens.
Okay. All right. I think that's optimistic. Okay. So kind of one question I want to ask is, what intangible skills do you feel that are important in today's market?
And there's a few standouts. I mean, if I look at the amount of uncertainty and the complexity of problems that brands, and each brand has its own unique set of challenges, I think agility really stands out as an intangible skill. I mean, being able to understand and being agile within companies from startup to medium to have to adjust to whatever those challenges are and bring value, bring impact, and be able to communicate that in an interview process. I think that's a strength and a skill set that is more highlighted now than ever. It's interesting in my intake process, there's been, and I commented on this last weekend at an event, it's surprising to me that this was something that got commented or asked for, or just they feel like they don't see, is the willingness to do the work. I mean, maybe because I love what I do, it's just comes natural to always be willing to put the work in. But it's beyond that. I think it's, when you're working in environments where every person is critical, every person is making an impact, from small scrappy brands that maybe didn't get the investment and they had to continue to work smarter and make every dollar count, you're going to appreciate that proactive capability to get the job done. And, from executive I spoke with last week, the willingness means that everybody has to play a really critical role in rolling up their sleeves, no matter what level you're on. And, the CEOs certainly, I think, set the standard there, but that's one that stands out. I think critical thinking and problem solving, understanding in the hiring process, what's a problem this hiring manager or this company is trying to solve. And if you can understand the problem and you can use your experience to be the solution, that is going to lead to results. And having that ability to demonstrate critical thinking and problem solving has certainly been part of a lot of executives' successes in 2025. I think grit and resilience, we've all had to have a little grit and resilience in 2025 through the roller coaster, and I don't see that changing. And growth mindset. I mean, for people who join today, you're here because you want to learn. You want to continue to understand how to navigate and where opportunities are. But take that through 2026. Continue to listen to podcasts. Join. CEW has their global trend report webinar next week, and that is, I think, to me, a really, really very important webinar to attend. And why? Because you're understanding the landscape of what's changed in the business from data in 2025, what they foresee for trends beyond, what I'm seeing, But it really sets a roadmap of where growth is, highlighting the companies that are doing well. And from a hiring perspective, I mean, those should be companies you're targeting. So that to me is a missed opportunity outside of being able to glean information that you can use to, again, talk about a pulse on the market in the business when you're not currently working is very helpful. So those would be ones that stand out.
Amazing. Okay, and sort of linked to that, Chandra's asked, many leaders today have non-linear career paths that span product, marketing, and commercial functions. From your perspective, how can professionals with hybrid skills how can professionals with hybrid skill sets most effectively position themselves for executive roles when these roles don't really follow a traditional career ladder?
So, I mean, I'm not 100% sure if I understand the question. I think that let me try, Chandra, and we can always sidebar if I'm not answering in the way that you're asking. But yes, leaders do have a non-linear way of their career path, and that doesn't dictate how they hire. Sometimes it does. I mean, there are scenarios when I take on searches, and I like to always profile hiring managers. Let's say if they come outside of the beauty industry, they're more likely to hire people that are outside of beauty. If executives are only from beauty, sometimes there's a bigger push to hire beauty professionals only. So there's certainly different scenarios. I think that you have to focus on your value and what you bring to the table, and we can't be everything to everybody. I think that's where people go awry in the interview process, is that you may have 15 achievements and maybe 5 of them are applicable to that job. So you have to qualify yourself based on the needs of what that job and that company is, instead of qualifying yourself for every single function that you've done. So tailoring your qualifications, starting with a resume, to your talking points and highlighting the right achievements in the interview process, and then asking specific questions that are going to help you understand the job itself and where you're going to have a challenge. Maybe it's a stretch, but then you've got to prove yourself, yada, yada, yada. So I hope that answers it. If it doesn't, let's definitely sidebar.
Okay, hopefully that has answered. If not, let us know. Okay, so in a moment, Debbie, I'm going to ask you for advice for those people who are looking to move. But before then, we have a really, really good set of shows coming in 2026. So can you let people know what we've got for our next show? And if there are any more questions, please pop them in the comments and I'll bring them to Debbie. But Debbie, what's our next show?
Yeah, absolutely. So in February, the focus of the show is going to be the evolution of beauty education skills that sell. And we have Jackie Schraub, who's retail and brand sales leader executive. She's from L'Oreal, Estee Lauder, Coty's, worked for a lot of big, very deep expertise in luxury, Sephora, Ulta. And I thought this was a very important topic, and I'm having Jackie speak to it based on her expertise, because, education has evolved so much, and it continues to evolve. And understanding the skill set that you had, 10, 15 years ago that was relevant then and is not relevant now, but I want to go into how to evolve. And she's going to talk through, as a hiring manager, what she's seen, changes in the industry, and then what stands out and what you can do as a professional to continue to forge ahead and be competitive with that skill set. So I think where we're seeing so much changes in the business and specific areas and skill set, education is certainly one of them. And I think this will be exciting discussion and very relevant.
Okay, amazing. Okay, so if you do have any final questions, guys, pop them in the comments and I will bring them up. But Debbie, for those people who are struggling in today's market, or perhaps had a rougher experience in 2025, what advice do you have for them for 2026?
So I say this often, and I will continue to repeat it, because the number one is know your expertise, know your value. I can't tell you how many times I have this discussion, I have this question, I'm on the phone all day, I'm interviewing candidates or understanding, what their, I call superpower or area of expertise is. And there is a lot of pauses sometimes. Some people know it and some have, so many of them, but you need to define that. And when you define it and you have achievements that are impactful and you can share your story, that will set you apart. And I think the resume, we talked about the ATS, but I do think the resumes need to be customized. It opens up the opportunity to get in the door. But then you've got to fine tune your interviewing skills and how to connect. It's not all just qualifying yourself, but it's connecting with the people you're speaking with. And I think as the industry continues to change, educating yourself and knowing what's happening. It's hard sometimes when you're not in the day-to-day and you're not working. And it also can be, I know I heard from a lot of people, I mean, you're sitting in your room and you're applying for all of these roles, and you're not hearing anything back. And quite frankly, it's depressing, and it's a confidence knocker. But I think the mindset is something that is so, so important. And no interview or job defines you. Let's say that, number one. Number two is interview is a two-way street, and sometimes you're not going to connect. Sometimes you're going to have a bad interview. What you want to do is learn from it. What can you have done better? And that isn't going to stop you from propelling forward. You can stop yourself, but take a minute, give yourself a learning opportunity, learn from it, and do better the next time. So I think that the more you motivate yourself, keep in tune with what's happening, and go out for breakfasts, lunches, and just stay in the know, it's just going to help you in the communication and take out the nerves of interviewing. And don't put so much pressure on yourself. Interviewing should be a conversation. The more that you set the tone of a conversation where you can highlight your success and expertise, the better you're going to be at it. So I would say focus on a great mindset, and I think you're going to get the results you want in 2026.
Okay, amazing. So we have had some last minute questions come in, and I want to pull them out now. So Samantha said, where can we attend the other webinar on skills to stand out? So I will answer this one for you. So it will be on LinkedIn in exactly the same way that this is. So if you connect with Debbie, you'll see it when she posts. However, if you're watching this now or watching the recording of it, if you would like to make sure that we invite you to that session, just pop a 7 in the comments, and I will make sure that you get an invite to the next session. So if you would like to do that, you can also follow us on Spotify, where Beauty Talent Talk has a podcast of the recording as well, if you would like. So hopefully that answers your question. And then Debbie, we've had a question here from somebody saying, do we really need to personalize our resume for each role we apply to?
I mean, I hate to... I think the reality is, with so much of this screening, that if you're applying for jobs that are outside of your scope and you're not qualified to begin with, I mean, don't tailor it and make things up, or, I mean, there's not going to be a reason to do that. But I think customizing and making sure that the keywords align, there's a lot of acronyms, there's a lot of different titles. I mean, some of them do have to realign. It's about getting you better results. And the advice is to try to tweak it here and there so that it is aligning with the criteria, and you're going to see more results, meaning more interviews from applying.
Okay, perfect. I know that's possibly not the answer you wanted to hear, but I think that is very accurate. Okay, so we see some 7s coming in the comments, so people definitely want to be invited to the next show, so I'll make sure that happens for you. Okay, Debbie, we have come towards the end of this show, the first one of 2026. I think it's been a cracker. So do you want to kind of round up, say thank you, and take us out?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining the episode. I hope you found value. If I haven't connected with you already, please send me a connection. Love to speak with you, and look forward to an exciting 2026.